Congressman Floyd Fithian joined fellow Democrats Friday at the opening of the Highland Democratic headquarters. Fithian spoke of his hopes for success as a Senate candidate in the November election.
We look back to the days when Lake County used to turn out 50 or 60,000 vote plurality. But in those years, of course, it was much more strongly Democratic with a better turnout than we've had in the last two or three or four elections. I could visualize a win in Lake County of 50,000 votes or more.
Fithian also commented on his opponent's support of tax bills aiding corporations. He sees Richard Lugar's support of the bills as a conflict of interest, as the tax breaks benefit a business that Lugar owns.
I can't say that a rich man ought not to be in the United States Senate. That's not what I'm saying at all. I am saying it's wrong, however, for a United States Senator on 3 separate occasions to vote to preserve one of the most gaping loopholes in the tax bill, and then turn around after he has voted to preserve that and go back to his company, of which he is Secretary-Treasurer in his family company, and help them form a DISC, that's the Domestic International Sales Corporation, through which they then can shelter 50% of their overseas profits from any U.S. taxes at all. Now, when you do that, and the DISC has cost us $10 billion since 1971, and the Treasury Department, governed by Republicans, told us in their estimate that in the next 5 years it would cost us $10 billion more.
Senator Lugar added to the weekend's political parlay, addressing Fithian's attendance performance in Congress.
My opponent, in 8 years, he's been there a long time, all things considered, has introduced 103 pieces of legislation, and only 1 has passed. And those were minor boundary changes in the Dunes National Park. And that's it. 8 years of legislative efforts, zilch, 0. Now, anybody who thinks that's effectiveness had better re-gauge your thinking, because that fellow just hadn't got the job done. And I would suggest that if he's at 75% level of attendance falling, it's unlikely he's going to get very much else done. And we Republicans just have to tell it like it is. What we're electing in the United States Senate or a member of Congress is somebody who works, who is effective, who, just like every laboring person in Lake County, is expected to be on the job, doing the job every day. Whether you like it or not, whether you feel like it, up to it, or what have you, you're there. That's what Republicans stand for, and it's an important quality.
Senator Dan Quayle, supporting Lugar, added his comments on Fithian's candidacy.
What we have talked about is getting inflation down, which has been accomplished, trying to get interest rates down. Interest rates have come down about 7 percentage points since the last 2 years. Now, then, I do not like or appreciate the high rate of unemployment. Simply intolerable. But who's working for any of the kind of constructive alternatives that are going to provide jobs and opportunity? That's people like Senator Dick Lugar. You know, his opponent is negative and makes criticism, but he's the one that's out there that's doing an effective job in the United States Senate, that is working hard, that is there on the job day in and day out. And I believe that people of Lake County will take a good hard look at the candidates, as they always do. And I think they're going to vote for hope, I think they're going to vote for opportunity, and they're not going to vote for a very negative, ill-conceived campaign that has nothing to offer but rhetoric. We're getting tired of the politicians coming in and day out with little substance to offer. You know, they make a lot of promises. What we're going to talk about are real meaningful jobs, like my job training bill.
Lugar and Quayle spoke last night at a Republican fundraising dinner in Maryville. For Northwest Indiana News, I'm Sherry Moline. Lieutenant Governor John Mutz campaigned for 1st District congressional candidate Tom Krieger this week in Maryville. Mutz affirmed that Mayor Hatcher acted properly in appointing Indiana Senator Katie Hall as an interim and long-term replacement for the late Adam Benjamin. The Lieutenant Governor then stated reasons for his support of Tom Krieger in the November election.
As the Lieutenant Governor, I serve as the President of the Indiana Senate. And my purpose in being here was to support the campaign of Tom Krieger for the U.S. Congress. And in doing that, I said that one of the principal issues in this campaign was the vacant seat. And in this case, I meant the vacant seat that I often looked at and saw on the Democratic side of the Indiana Senate as I preside over that body. Because in fact, Mrs. Hall, who is Tom's opponent, has one of the worst attendance records in the Indiana Senate. And it seems to me that one of the important considerations for a seat of this kind is someone who will not only be present but also affirmatively represent the viewpoint of the entire district. In this campaign, there are several key issues. One of them, as I indicated, is the attendance record of the Democrat. The second one is the support of President Reagan and his program for economic recovery.
Krieger added more goals he'll work for if elected.
Well, I'd like to get interest rates down so that we can get employment back to where it belongs, end this horrible unemployment problem. And I believe that one of the keys to that is the interest rate situation.
In Maryville, for Northwest Indiana News, I'm Sherry Moline. Incumbent Bryant Matthews and first-time runner Larry Pardis are two election opponents in Maryville's District 1 school board race. Matthews is ending his first four-year term and runs to preserve an experienced school board.
Probably the number one thing that I decided to run for re-election is because two other board members are not running. And being a five-board member, board, Maryville, I just think that three new members coming on, it's really tough. So it's, it's very difficult to try to run an organization when you have three new members. Probably my number one goal will be this term is I would like to, we're getting into the computer age, and this year we purchased 15 computers for both junior highs, so which gives us 30 computers into the junior highs. And in the next year to 2 years, I'd like to see us get even into the elementary. So instead of being a follower in the computer age, I'd like to see Maryville be a leader.
Aside from computer program expansion, Matthews seeks increased community involvement with the schools. He notes present school board gains in this area.
If people have not been to Maryville board meetings, when we were elected and got on, we said we'd be an open board as far as people would be able to come and say what they wanted to say and have their, anytime they wanted to say anything that they thought was wrong or right or anything, we'd give them that opportunity, and we have.
Matthews adds the board's initiation of senior citizen school function passes as another community inclusion. Pardis seeks increased academic emphasis in Maryville schools.
My concern is to get recognition for academic achievement more so than athletic achievement, and I think that my concern is for obtaining this through teachers, through parents, through students, through administration, and if we can do those sort of things and put academics back into the school, I think we're going to accomplish a whole lot more than has been accomplished in the past. And I would rather see a sign posted on Route 30 that says, Maryville, Indiana, home of the best academic school system in the state, rather than home of the state basketball champions.
Pardis adds that community input is essential for the school board. He feels that board members are individually responsible for promoting this.
If I'm in a position to where I can talk to people and get some input, the more input we get from people out of this community, and it's a community school system, the better off we're going to be. If the school system has input from the community and from parents and from teachers and from administrators, and it's all working together, I think we'll achieve a heck of a bunch more than's been done in the past. If I can get input from other people, and I have an open door, and I have a telephone that works, I think that those things are going to accomplish a whole heck of a bunch more than if I sit back and make rules and regulations and things like this. I'd like to know where we spend our money. I'd like to know what we can do better with the money that we have available and how we can obtain more money.
For Northwest Indiana News, I'm Sherry Moline.
In an effort to get those eligible voters registered for the November general election, Mayor Richard Hatcher announced that free transportation will be available starting tomorrow through Saturday and again on Monday to Crown Point.
But I think voting is the most precious right, because really it's the only opportunity that we have to have anything to say about our government at whatever level. And while people may appear before governmental bodies or governmental officials and protest this and protest that, the ultimate protest is when you cast your vote.
Vans will depart from 7 different locations in Gary at 1 p.m. Crown Point registration hours are from 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday and from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday. Voter registration concludes on Monday, October the 4th at 4:30 p.m.
Obviously, this voter registration drive is nonpartisan. It's not a partisan voter registration drive. But my hope certainly is that in this particular election on November 2nd, we will see the largest turnout, certainly in our own community, possible, or perhaps the largest turnout in history. And the important thing to keep in mind is that if you aren't registered, then you can't vote. So.
Those of you who require more information may call 944-6551. For Northwest Indiana News, I'm Devine Perry.
The chief sanitarian in the food division of the Lake County Health Department, George Marks, says Tylenol bottles with the suspected lot numbers have been found in Northwest Indiana.
There was some found at an Aldi's location, and I had a call from our nurse in Whiting at the Whiting Board of Health, and she stated that one of the supermarkets in Whiting had some of the Tylenol with the one code, the MC2880. And they've picked that up, the Whiting police have picked that up, and they've taken it all off the shelf. So people are aware through the different news medias that this is really a serious problem. And to the best of our knowledge, it's been all taken off the shelf. In fact, they're taking not just the codes that have been stated through the FDA, they're taking all the Tylenol off the shelf, just as a precaution.
No deaths have been reported in Northwest Indiana due to cyanide poisoning at this time. Senior microbiologist Rick Bates explains what people should do if they think they might have some tainted Tylenol.
If they do suspect it, they should turn it over to their local police department, and the Lake County Coroner's Office will pick it up from the police department.
So you're asking them not to destroy it then?
No, please do not destroy it.
Okay, and then what will happen to the medicine?
As far as I know, the coroner's office then will examine it for the cyanide, or at least they will collect it and get it to the proper agency to have it returned.
Bates also describes the symptoms of cyanide poisoning.
It can be noticed, usually a peach blossom type breath. You can smell it, the peach blossoms on the breath, or a bitter almond type. Initially, a small dose of cyanide will cause vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, to the point where mental confusion starts. The pulse will slow, and if those symptoms show up, it's best to get to the emergency room and have a doctor take care of them.
Officials don't know how many bottles of Tylenol have been sold recently, and also hope that the cyanide doesn't turn up in any other medications. Hammond State Representative Mary Pedersen says a certificate of need where utilities prove the future use of proposed power plants should be required, saying such a procedure currently is not followed.
Currently, the plant is approved by the board of the utility, and then the permissions are obtained for building and things like that, and the EPA permissions. And the actual Public Service Commission permission to put it into the rate-making process is not obtained until at the end of the period.
State Representative candidate Mark Holton of Munster spoke about requiring state Senate confirmation of Public Service Commission nominees. He says there are several reasons for this proposal.
First of all, it would enhance the checks and balance system in our state government. Secondly, it would allow for a greater legislative share of the responsibility for the members selected for the Public Service Commission. Thirdly, it would improve the citizen input in the selection procedure. Right now, one man in this entire state selects each and every member of the Public Service Commission.
State Representative candidate Don Gwynn of Lowell talked about amending the open door law to require the PSC to make its decisions at public meetings with advance notice.
And the public has a right to know how the Public Service Commission arrives at its decisions. The Commission is a government agency that should serve the people, and we are entitled to hear the Commission's discussion on the issues. I would like to point out that more confidence in the Public Service Commission might be attained if the public knows how they arrive at the decision and if, in fact, the decisions are based on factual evidence.
State Senator John Buscemi of Calumet Township suggests that customer security deposits being held by utilities be used for a weatherization program for homes of senior citizens.
All of us know about home weatherization and the strides and improvements that we've made in conserving energy costs with the weatherization program. The average home can be weatherized for approximately $1,000, and we have been told that the utility companies in Indiana have on deposit each year a total of $13 million. And what we envision is that this pool of $13 million could be made available to qualified homeowners for weatherization, and in the long run, substantial savings in what we spend for utility costs and heating bills in the winter could be received by Indiana taxpayers.
Lake County Prosecutor Jack Crawford says an investigative body will be formed to concentrate on this one case.
At the request of Mr. Van Bachlen, I have agreed to petition the Lake County Superior Court for the impaneling of a special grand jury to investigate the murder of Jay Given. This petition will be filed within the next few days with the Chief Judge of the Lake Superior Court, James DeNicholas.
Special Investigator Joe Van Bachlen explains why a special grand jury is being called.
Indicated we have a suspect, and at this point we felt the investigation would best move forward with the use of a special grand jury.
Crawford says polygraph tests have been administered concerning the tampering of evidence connected with Given's death.
Of the over 100 examinations administered, there is only one individual who has declined to take a polygraph examination. We are not going to identify that person except to say this fact. Number one, he is an East Chicago police officer. And it is our understanding that at the present time, the chief of the East Chicago Police Department has brought charges against this individual for refusing to follow a direct order of the police chief, that order being to take the polygraph examination, and that those charges are pending before the Board of Public Safety in the city of East Chicago.
Authorities say they hope to have the special grand jury in a couple of weeks. Fithian says Lugar supports a plan where individuals under 47 years of age would be encouraged to depend on individual retirement accounts, and says Lugar has voted to cut minimum Social Security benefits 9 times. Fithian explains what those minimum benefits are.
The concept of minimum benefits is if you qualify at all, even though you worked at low-paying jobs, you would not get less than the minimum. 5 votes in a row, Lugar voted to knock off those on minimum benefits. Ultimately, they compromised and they said, all right, everybody that's drawing minimum benefits can continue to draw them, but no one after January 1st, which affects about 3 million Americans. That is a cut. It just plain is. If you knock it out altogether, you're cutting a person's Social Security.
Fithian also attacked the Reagan administration's stand on Social Security, which she says Lugar supports.
At first, the administration said they proposed a cut of $80 billion in Social Security, and there was an uproar from one end of the land to the other, and they backed away from it. Then they moved to, well, we'll cut the amount that you can draw if you retire early, and there was an uproar, and they backed away from it. Then they stuck with their guns and did the minimum Social Security benefits, and just you go right on down the line. What I think is clear here is that there's just something about that wing of the Republican Party that doesn't believe in Social Security. It goes back to the Goldwater concept of making it voluntary. And every once in a while it crops up. And this plan for under 47 has all the markings of the Goldwater 64 policy kind of rewrit into modern times.
Fithian concluded by saying Lugar owes it to Indiana residents, especially the elderly, to explain why he voted to make Social Security at least semi-voluntary.
To amend an appropriation.
Ron Jones and Sharon Fox are 2 of 5 candidates competing for Maryville's District 2 school board seat. Jones served a previous school board term and feels experience is necessary for the new board. He plans for some new programs if elected, but stresses continuation of positive present policies. He emphasizes board involvement as advisory and not administrative.
Well, one thing I would hope to accomplish is I feel a real concern about the role of the school board member, and I feel that in with the present board, there's been a little bit too much involvement or interference in the day-to-day running of schools. And I think that we need to get back on the course where the school board member is a policy setter and hires administrators and professional staff to carry out the policies and not get all involved in the day-to-day running of the schools. I think that's a mistake. Most school board members are not qualified to do that and certainly don't have the time. And of course, we hire, hopefully, very qualified people to do that, and I think we ought to let them do that.
Jones feels his past school board experience and his banking experience are assets he'll bring to Maryville schools if he's elected.
I think that a school board job is a difficult one, particularly in the area of finances and the area of budgeting, because budgeting of school corporations is so different than any other kind of accounting procedures that I've ever been involved with. I'm a banker. It's my occupation, and I deal with those kind of things day in and day out. However, in school corporations, it's quite a bit different, and it took me a while to understand the budgeting of the fiscal years and calendar years and making projections on income when you don't even know what the legislature is going to give you. And it's quite a problem, and so I think the experience I've had in the past would be valuable. And
Sharon Fox is a first-time board runner. She looks for more communication between the community and the school board.
I see a need to increase the development of vocational and skilled areas in the curriculum. They're on the right track, I feel, right now, but I feel that they need to be greatly increased. And I feel the school system as a whole, starting with the board and the administration, need to be more humanistic to the needs of all the students and the parents. I think there's a real lack in there. Well, I feel that the board is kind of distant from the people who elected them. I think once, when they're not elected, they're running, they're very, very compassionate, and they have, talk to everyone and everything. Then when they're elected, you can't get a hold of them. And I just feel that this is not right. I think that we as taxpayers need to have someone to talk to.
Sharon Fox wants the Maryville board more involved with staff negotiations. She's concerned with expense account reviews and noting where tax dollars are spent. Fox also feels the board needs another woman in service.
Well, I feel that we need more women on the board, at least another one or so, because mothers are the ones who have the most interest in the children. I shouldn't say maybe the most interest, but who go to all the meetings and see that their children get educated.
For Northwest Indiana News, I'm Sherry Moline.
The plane, piloted by 19-year-old Patrick Powell of Chicago, was attempting to land on a grass runway with the wind when the plane touched down, overshot the runway, and crashed into a ditch. One of the first persons at the scene, Dan Jackham, says the plane was traveling about 30 miles an hour at impact.
Hit the grass. He came in over that cement pad, hit the grass, bounced once, and then he hit and shuttled down, and then he just kept coming.
Jackham and Alex Vazarol explain what they did when they reached the plane.
I pulled out, I guess her name is Cindy, and Dan pulled out the man, Patrick, and then I stayed with Dorothy while Dan went to find out how to shut off the airplane.
Yeah, we shut off the electric because the fuel was leaking all over and we didn't want to have a fire. And then we stayed with her until the paramedics got here.
Jackham describes Horak's injuries.
Well, she was bleeding out of her nose and out of the side of her face real bad, and she was gagging, so we had to sort of keep her head up a little bit because she couldn't breathe. So we both took turns running back and forth to check for the paramedics.
Powell is in fair condition at St. Margaret Hospital in Hammond with facial cuts and a possible broken nose. One of the passengers, 40-year-old Dorothy Horak of Glenwood, is also at St. Margaret Hospital in critical condition with head injuries. Her daughter, 21-year-old Cindy Horak, was treated for lacerations and abrasions and released.
Incumbent Michael Jimbala and former board member John Janos are two opponents in the November 2nd Whiting School Board election. Jimbala runs for a continuation of present policies. He joined the board in its first elected year and notes the present board accomplishments.
Is that I have accomplished something in 3 years that never was accomplished in the school city of Whiting, because they were appointees there before. And this is elective school board. And I did a cleaning house job there and got rid of some business manager and superintendent. We got a new superintendent in there, and from there on it's clean cut and honest as the day long. The children have the best of education. Everything is back into where it belongs, to the community and to the teachers and everything else. That's what I accomplished, and that's why I ran for office in the first place, and that's why I want to be reelected again, to keep it sound and keep it within where it belongs.
Apart from administration changes, Jimbala adds remedial reading programs, classroom equipment updates, building improvements as other concerns.
Because there's cry for a gym floor, and you know, hasn't been in there since 1950, and there's other accomplishments that have to be done. And as time goes by, there's computers and everything else there, and they're put in there now, and children, and make sure that everything is for the community too, because that's where your tax money comes from. That is the progress of the world today, is education, and what else is left? But if you don't get your education, you don't go no.
John Janos also runs to provide experience and improved representation.
Had run previously and had served a successful term on the board. At the time, I'm very interested in getting back on the board to give the people of the community 100% representation. I feel that they need to have people there and attend the meetings 100%. Some of the people who are running have not been in attendance 100%, and I don't think that's fair.
Janos wants to continue on organization of the school policy manual. He wants a more efficient school system and stresses that the board stay out of daily administration.
You're there to be there as a guide, not to be there as an administrator.
Community programs related to the schools are important to Janos. He hopes to initiate adult education classes and open sports facilities. Janos feels his background in education and management qualify him for the school board, along with previous board experience.
I feel that this educational and business experience will be invaluable on the board when it comes time to understanding budget items, understanding the budget, developing the budget. I had quite a hand in helping with the budgets before. I think that perhaps the board needs to have those kinds of people that better understand what's going on in the budget, why the monies are put where, what the expenditures mean.
For Northwest Indiana News, this is Bill Latour.
Lugar says the major issue facing the economy is the need for the federal government to cut spending to bring the deficit down through curtailment of excessive federal spending.
We've made great headway in that respect, but the fact remains that interest rates are coming down too slowly, and one of the reasons that they're coming down too slowly is the federal government is borrowing billions of dollars each week to pay for a deficit that remains unconscionably high. So I think that as we analyze where we're headed in the economy, we have to keep our eye on the ball, that essentially we got into difficulty because we spent far too much money. The problem probably has been a 50-year problem of tax and tax, spend and spend, and it was politically popular and had some good effects. That time is over, and the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980 brought it to a halt, and the movement in the other direction is proceeding, and with great difficulty, and we shall not succeed really until we have the thing under control.
Lugar says unemployment is still far too high, and he says he'll continue to work for ways to improve the steel industry, saying job retraining is also a must, and the country won't have full employment without lower deficits, which is why we must continue to fight against the big spending ways that brought on today's hardships.
To be very blunt about it, I think it's about time that this administration and Senator Lugar and the Republicans in the Senate stand up and take credit and responsibility for their policy. They've been whistling by the graveyard long enough, and they ought to remember what Harry Truman said: the buck stops here after a while. Now, the fact of the matter is that unemployment was trending downward when this administration took over. It was 7.4%. It continued to trend downward until their policies took effect, and by July, after they were sworn in January, unemployment was at 7.2. It started climbing up with the implementation of Reaganomics, and it has continued to climb to this day. And the tragic thing is that the Republican Party in Washington and the Republican administration and the Senate simply ignore the human elements of unemployment. It isn't just the 11 million people who are unemployed. We have another 1.5 million who've given up looking for a job. We have another 4.5 million who are working part-time and need a full-time job. You're talking about 19 million Americans, and I think it's high time that the government of the United States put jobs as a priority. And this administration, tragic as it is to say so, does not have jobs as a priority at all.
George Putz is running for Maryville's District 1 school board seat to bring Maryville students more educational opportunities. Putz wants to work within present system policies, but hopes to expand in some areas.
One of the concerns that I do have, though, that so many school systems fall into, is that to get on bandwagons. A few years ago, the bandwagon was getting back to the basics. I still believe that we need to develop within our elementary youngsters the basic areas of reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then from that area, as they move into junior and senior high school, then get into some of the other particular types of programs. I think another issue that I'm concerned about, and that is our special education programs. Many times I read in the newspapers that the Northwest Indiana Cooperative is having to cut back as far as their staff and the amount of monies that they have. These youngsters have not disappeared. The youngsters are still there. And I think that we need to continue providing services for these particular students.
Putz also stresses the importance of parent, teacher, and backup personnel involvement with the schools. He feels that people, and not money, are a necessary factor for improvement.
I don't think the money actually makes or breaks a school corporation. I think the people who are working within that corporation and the parents in the homes are the ones who either make or break a child in school. A major concern for running, though, is because I care about the education my two sons receive. And I care enough that I'll give, my time to devote, if I was elected, to being the kind of a school board candidate that the people would want.
L.J. Christ is a candidate in Maryville's District 2 school board race. If he's elected, Christ will work for increased quality of curriculum and faculty.
I've been very concerned over the past few years of my involvement in the school corporation of Maryville, with a close association with it. I'm presumably very interested in our student activities, their procedures, their education, their academic welfare. We at Maryville are known across the state for our outstanding sports and teamwork. It is time that we use our teamwork and take a lesson from our teams and sports and do a complete revision of our academic procedures in Maryville.
Christ is also concerned with meeting the needs of school professionals.
We have, in the past, been lax in several fields. It is hard to get teachers in certain fields. We're going to have to adjust to be able to bring these teachers into these fields, math and science. We're going to have to make a special effort to maintain our quality of teachers that we have had in the past.
Chris' wife has taught in Maryville for 18 years. He feels this relationship has helped acquaint him with administration procedures, failures, and accomplishments. To improve these areas, Chris seeks more community involvement.
There needs to be greatly improved community relationships with the school board. If you attend school board meetings, they are not well attended. We need to, as a community, be very supportive of our school board, of our administration. The community must set guidelines, what they want, and to focus on areas that we need to work in. At the same time, the community should have the consensus of the school board and administration and to set policies. Policies should not be set or changed by an individual's dislikes or likes. We need to have the consensus of the community.
Martha Berger is a first-time runner for the Tri-Creek School Board. She's worked with several community groups such as the Parent-Teacher Organization and the Cub Scouts, and she stresses increased community input in board decisions.
Okay. Primarily, my main goal would be that to make it known to the citizens of the community, and by the citizens I mean teachers, parents, and students, who might have constructive input to give to the school board, to make them feel that they are welcome at the school board, they will be heard, and their comments will be taken under consideration, and I would like to see this done with an open and an unbiased mind. But the main thing is to keep the avenue of communication open and then use those to the best of the ability for the betterment of the school and the community.
Berger also stresses parent-teacher conferences as an important school board consideration. She feels the conferences help keep parents in touch with the school system.
I think there are some things to take under advisement and under consideration, and one of them would be, I would like to entertain a thought about continuing on the conferences for the school children. Right now they stop at the 6th grade. And I think they should go on, possibly on into high school. I think that the conferences should be given the utmost attention. I think that if at all possible, we should never cancel parent-teacher conferences. They are a vital part of the communication system between the school and the parent. On a particular occasion, they were canceled at the end of last school year. And it was a decision made by the school board and the administration, I would assume. And there were remonstrators at that meeting. There were teachers who were opposed to the cancellations. There were parents who were vocal and opposed, but none of this was taken into consideration. So I think we need to take a good hard look at that one.
School board incumbent Mary Hayden is also running for the Cedar Creek District at-large seat. She feels she can bring experience to the board from her past term input.
Before I came on the board, I had the opinion that everything was just a yes and agreement type thing, and now I don't feel that way, and I have disagreed at times with things that have been done, and although I'm only one board member, I do feel that sometimes my opinion has counted and some changes have been made. And I think no matter how good a corporation is or a school board, there's always room for improvement.
Hayden also feels financial issues need to be better understood within the community.
finances. A lot of times people feel that the money isn't going where it should be going, or that you should borrow from one fund to help another fund out, and there are guidelines set up for this, and we cannot transfer money from one fund to the other just to, like you do your budget at home, and there are a lot of things financially that are set up that we have to follow. Programs that we must offer, such as driver's training, and the cost of the program has gotten so large, and the federal government does not contribute to this like they did in the past, and yet we are required to provide that for our students, and just things like that that make it kind of difficult at times.
Interaction between the community and the school board is another issue that Hayden addresses.
I have stressed to people that I am the board representative for them, and I ask them to call me when they have problems that can't be dissolved any other way. I encourage people to do that because I feel that's the only way you can do a good job, is to have direct contact with the people.
For Northwest Indiana News, I'm Sherry Moline.
Or go to a principal with their problems, because it's
The Federation for Progress, a coalition of Northwest Indiana organizations that oppose the Reagan administration, held a rally today in downtown Gary. We talked with Mary Kappas, one of the leaders of the organization.
This is a march for human needs. It's for jobs, peace, and equality. It's to raise these issues to the candidates, because elections are coming up in 2 or 3 weeks. We want to let the candidates know what the issues are. It's calling for a coalition or a federation of organizations and individuals to work together against Reaganomics and for jobs, peace, and equality. All of us, and we believe most of the American public, are on the one side against Reagan. He's on the other side against us. He is against jobs, peace, and equality. And he's doing everything he can to undermine the American public.
I then asked Mary where the marchers were planning on going next.
We're going to start right here at the unemployment office and demonstrate for jobs and for unemployment extensions until we get jobs. Then we're going to march right over to NIPSCO on Broadway and demonstrate against rate hikes and against shutoffs. Winter's coming. NIPSCO is shutting off people. There's 400 families in the Gary area that have no utilities at all, no gas, no electricity. Then we're going to welfare, and we're going to demonstrate against budget cuts.
For Northwest Indiana News, this is Bill Latour reporting.
The State and Superior Construction Company have been cited by Indiana's Occupational Safety Division for not following proper procedures while building the Klein Avenue Bridge ramp. That ramp collapsed in East Chicago on April 15th, killing 13 workers and injuring 20 others. IOSHA proposes a $22,680 fine against Superior Construction, a Gary firm, which was charged with 9 serious and 2 knowing violations. A $300 fine is suggested against Midwest Construction Company, which was cited for 1 serious violation. The Indiana Department of Highways, charged with 4 serious violations, cannot be fined under state law. Labor Commissioner Howard Williams says investigators have identified the cause of the Klein Avenue Bridge collapse as a weak concrete support pad that gave way. 3 150-foot sections of the bridge ramp under construction in East Chicago as part of the Klein Avenue Extension project collapsed and spurred numerous lawsuits. Williams says the National Bureau of Standards has not released its official report, but the Bureau says the pad triggered the collapse. Williams says once the pad gave way, everything fell in a chain reaction. Indiana's Occupational Safety Division issued 15 citations today against the State and Superior Construction Company for failing to follow proper procedures while building that ramp. U.S. Steel has agreed to pay $100,000 to the state of Illinois for pollution violations. The firm also will install equipment to ensure it complies with air quality standards under a consent order. Illinois Attorney General Tyrone Fainer says U.S. Steel agreed to pay the money into the Illinois Environmental Protection Trust Fund. The payment is part of a consent decree resulting from 2 lawsuits filed in 1975. U.S. Steel also agreed to install air pollution control equipment at Southworks. About 600 Portage employees of Midwest Steel will be affected by a 10% salary cut effective Sunday throughout the parent National Steel Corporation. Midwest spokesman Bob Lively says all management, technical, and clerical personnel will be affected. He says the pay cut is the latest in a series of cost-cutting measures by National. White-collar employees already have lost stock plans and extended vacations. He says a return to former levels is expected as soon as business conditions permit. Chicago to Toronto passenger rail service with a stop in Hammond will begin at the end of the month. The service is being offered by Amtrak and the Canadian Passenger Rail System. It'll take about 10.5 hours to make the 495-mile trip. The cost is $96 both ways. Two members of the Lake County Election Board, Joe Kotso and Ann Senchak, say nothing different was done in this year's purge, with almost 30,000 names struck from the lists. The two say the final voter total is down in Gary due to multiple registrations.
The final registration figures in Gary are 76,000 plus. The purge, I don't think was unusually high there, perhaps that they thought they were registering more people than they were. What happens in registration drives, and I understand in Gary that they pay these people for registering, is that they don't get their money's worth because people are registering and they're being paid, and all they are is duplicate registration. So it would be my guess, just from what you've said, that that's probably what happened.
So these are people that have already registered and
That's
they're
right.
just registering again.
Registering again to receive a fee and to be paid for it. I understand that happens in Gary.
And some are transfers. They transfer right after they register, and duplications and things like that.
That does not add to the registration rolls, where they think they're adding 8 or 10 or 12,000 people. In fact, they're only adding a couple thousand, perhaps.
Some of them register 2 and 3 times.
Spokesman George Scott explains why registration is needed.
What we need is a list of names that in an emergency situation we can draw on to fill up vacancies in the armed forces. Prior to the start of registration a couple of years ago, we had no list of names, and that really put us in a bunch of trouble. So what we have proposed to do is to register young men and continue registering young men, so that should an emergency occur, we do have those people available.
Scott says advance registration would save 4 to 6 weeks in putting together a military force. He also explains when registration is required.
They should register within 30 days of their 18th birthday, and any time after that, technically, they are in violation, although the system hasn't tried to prosecute anyone who has registered late, to my knowledge.
Scott says Indiana is low at 90% in the number of registrations by state, and says the conviction of a Goshen College student for refusing to register has had no effect on registration. Superior's attorney, Saul Ruhlman, says the blame for the collapse should not be put on Superior, saying contractors build only according to contract documents.
In this particular situation, we have been at least informed that there is a contention that Superior knowingly used under-designed concrete pads. And I submit on the face of that kind of an allegation that it is not a logical or credible contention. It's just not so. It's unbelievable and not true that the employees of Superior who are knowledgeable, experienced workers, or the Largura family who are concerned brothers operating a business with safety, certainly a primary consideration, were out there day after day walking under and on a structure that they had any knowledge or even the slightest suspicion was unsafe.
Ruman also faults IOSHA's procedures for not inspecting construction sites until after an accident has taken place.
An estimated 3,000 people gathered at the Genesis Convention Center on Saturday night to show their support to Mayor Richard Gordon Hatcher's Evening to Remember 5. Mayor Hatcher stated the fact that he did not know why he held press conferences for that particular evening.
It's not a serious event. In fact, anyone who is caught being serious this evening will be immediately banished, and we just won't tolerate any seriousness here this evening. But we want everyone who comes to have a good time.
MC for the evening was Mrs. Y. Jean Chambers, a professor from Purdue Calumet University. Guest appearances were made by Mrs. Coretta Scott King, Mrs. Jexie Jackson, and Katie Hall and Floyd Fithian. Food was provided by a local business group called Concessions Incorporated, which is headed by Donald Thompson and comprised of several small businesses. 250 young people were employed by Concessions to help cater the affair. Co-host duties for the entertainment segment were shared between actress Denise Nicholas and WGCI's radio personality Bob Wald of Chicago. The show was opened by a local entertainment group called 4 Flights Up, and with stormy weather, Jerry Butler, Nancy Wilson, and Ray Charles following. However, the night was not without its problems. There were long lines and cold conditions to contend with, and many people for the $100 a plate donation either received meat and bread without vegetables or bread and vegetables without meat. In the words of one woman, that's enough to make you hurt somebody. For Northwest Indiana News, I'm Devine Perry.
Hazel Nichols is running for her 3rd term as Cedar Creek representative for Tri-Creek School Board. Nichols taught in the low school system for 15 years, and she sees her school board terms as a way to keep in touch with education concerns. Nichols is happy with present board policies and decisions and says she's running to maintain current Tri-Creek standards.
I like to know what's going on in education, and this is my way of keeping in touch. I keep in touch with what's going on and keep in touch with the staff. Everything in education is important, and I don't know that I can pinpoint any one thing except that we are trying to continue with the programs that we have set up. We have a diversified curriculum, and we hope that we can continue with that.
Though Nichols' Cedar Creek campaign is unopposed, she feels the board seat competition in the at-large districts is a positive indication of community concern.
There seems to be a great deal of interest in the at-large offices for the school board. There are a number of candidates running in both West Creek and Cedar Creek. That's good. I like to see people interested in education, interested in the school board, and I wish more people would come to the meetings.